Look at the skyline of Blade Runner 2049. Piercing through the smog, you don't see glittering glass spires. You see massive, unyielding blocks of concrete that house the Wallace Corporation. This specific design language, characterized by raw, exposed materials and jagged geometric scale, is called Brutalism. Over the last 40 years, directors have adopted these concrete monoliths as science fiction's default aesthetic for unchecked corporate dominance. In this cinematic universe, the architecture acts as an active antagonist. The environment itself is built to visually crush the individual. But if we trace this aesthetic back to the 1950s, we find a massive historical paradox. Real brutalism was rooted in radical socialist ideals, created to provide communal public housing for the post-war working class. Architects chose béton brut, raw concrete, for its perceived honesty, providing an accessible way to offer dignity and shelter for the public. Looking at this terraced greenery, you can see the egalitarian vision they were aiming for, a vision that has largely been remembered as a failed utopia. How did an architectural movement designed to save humanity become the ultimate symbol of our capitalist subjugation? To find the answer, we have to jump to 1982. When Ridley Scott built the original Blade Runner, he drew foundational inspiration from the work of architect Frank Lloyd Wright. For Deckard's apartment, the production design borrowed heavily from Wright's Ennis house, utilizing these geometric, interlocking textile blocks covering the exterior. These blocks remove the open, communal feeling of standard concrete and replace it with a cold, fortress-like isolation. The filmmakers then took this heavy brutalism and blended it with the steep, stepped designs of ancient Mayan temple architecture to build their massive corporate headquarters. This specific crossover gives the Tyrell Corporation a religious, sacrificial aura, treating commerce and industry like a bloodthirsty religion. By weaponizing architectural history, the 1982 film laid the blueprint for the entire franchise, making the future feel simultaneously ancient and oppressive. When director Denis Villeneuve and cinematographer Roger Deakins took over for Blade Runner 2049, they needed to dramatically escalate this feeling of oppression. They explicitly looked at real-world brutalist architecture in London to shape the severe, imposing towers of the Wallace Corporation. Villeneuve and Deakins deconstructed the style, stripping away the communal intent of béton brut and repurposing the material to project an immense, crushing scale. The extreme geometry in these shots is deliberately framed to dwarf human life below, enforcing a sense of cold indifference. The sequel perfected this architecture of intimidation, stripping away the remnants of humanity from the concrete. Blade Runner's world-building achieves its impact through a complete ideological flip. The architecture is effective because it represents the total subversion of its own history. This chart shows how the exact same aesthetic parameters shifted from serving the working class in the 1950s to serving the elite in the cinematic future. Handing this architecture over to mega corporations communicates the total failure of communal public welfare. In this universe, hyper-stratified capitalism has literally devoured the tools and structures originally built to protect the public. Blade Runner proves that true cinematic world-building happens when the architecture tells the story of our subjugation before a single line of dialogue is ever spoken.